it's hard. It's hard because it's hard to know that. You'd have to go back and you'd have to have enough data to essentially say, and this goes back to this goes back to the case of how do we decide whether the AI is good enough to do a particular task, and regardless of whether or not it produces an explanation. So, and what standard do we hold, right, for that? So, if you look at more broadly, for example, as my father as a medical case, the medical system ultimately helped him a lot throughout his life. Without it, he probably would have died much sooner. So overall, it sort of worked for him in sort of a net kind of way. Actually, I don't know if that's fair.
But maybe not in that particular case, but overall, like the medical system overall does more good than bad.
The medical system overall, was doing more good than bad. Now, there's another argument that suggests that that wasn't the case, but for the sake of argument, let's say let's say a net positive. And I think you have to sit there and take that into consideration. Now you look at a particular use case. So, for example, making this decision. Have you done enough studies to know how good that prediction really is? And have you done enough studies to compare it to say, well, what if we dug in a more direct, let's get the evidence, let's do the deductive thing and not use statistics here. How often would that have done better? Right? So you have to do the studies to know how good the AI actually is. And it's complicated because it depends how fast you have to make the decision. So if you have to make decisions super fast, you have no choice. If you have more time, right? But if you're ready to pull the plug, and this is a lot of the argument that I had with the doctor, I said, what's he going to do if you do it what's going to happen to him in that room if you do it my way? If you do, well, he's going to die anyway. So let's do it my way.
I mean, it raises questions for our society to struggle with, as is the case with your father, but also when things like race and gender start coming into play, when judgments are made based on things that are complicated in our society, at least in the discourse, and it starts, I think I'm safe to say that most of the violent crimes committed by males. So if you discriminate based, with a male versus female, saying that if it's a male, more likely to commit a crime.
So this is one of my very positive and optimistic views of why the study of artificial intelligence, the process of thinking and reasoning logically and statistically, and how to combine them is so important for the discourse today, because it's causing, regardless of what state AI devices are or not, it's causing this dialogue to happen. This is one of the most important dialogues that, in my view, the human species can have right now, which is how to think well, and how to reason well, how to understand our own cognitive biases and what to do about them. That has got to be one of the most important things we as a species can be doing, honestly. We've created an incredibly complex society. We've created amazing abilities to amplify noise faster than we can amplify signal. We are challenged. We are deeply, deeply challenged. We have, big segments of the population getting hit with enormous amounts of information. Do they know how to do critical thinking? Do they know how to objectively reason? Do they understand what they are doing, never mind what their AI is doing? This is such an important dialogue, to be having. And we are fundamentally, our thinking can be and easily becomes fundamentally biased. And there are statistics, and we shouldn't blind ourselves, we shouldn't discard statistical inference, but we should understand the nature of statistical inference. As a society, we decide to reject statistical inference, to favor understanding and deciding on the individual. We consciously make that choice. So even if the statistics said males are more likely to have, to be violent criminals. We still take each person as an individual and we treat them based on the logic and the knowledge of that situation. We purposely and intentionally reject the statistical inputs. We do that out of respect for the individual.
Yeah, and then that requires reasoning.
Correct.
Looking forward, what grand challenges would you like to see in the future? Because the Jeopardy challenge, captivated the world. AlphaGo, AlphaZero captivated the world. Deep Blue certainly beating Kasparov. Gary's bitterness aside, and captivated the world. What do you think? Do you have ideas for next grand challenges for future challenges of that ilk?
I think there are lots of really great ideas for grand challenges. I'm particularly focused on one right now, which is can you demonstrate that they understand, that they can read and understand, that they can acquire these frameworks and communicate, reason and communicate with humans.
What up, Zoot?
So it is kind of like
how you living, pimp?
It's a little bit more demanding.
What's good?
It's not enough. It's not enough to convince me that you might be human because you could parrot a conversation. I think
Can you hear
the
me?
standard is a little bit higher. Is, for example,
all right.
Can you?
I need like 10 minutes. All right.
The standard is higher, and I think one of the challenges that lies in this grand challenge is that we're not sure.
No one wants to hear that.
What intelligence is. We're not sure how to determine whether or not two people actually understand each other, and in what depth they understand it. To what depth they understand each other. So the challenge becomes something along the lines of, can you satisfy me that we have a shared understanding?
Just one moment.
So if I were to probe, and you probe me, can machines really act like thought partners, where they can satisfy me that we have our understanding is shared enough that we can collaborate and produce answers together, and that they can help me explain and justify those answers.
So maybe here's an idea. So we'll have AI system run for president and convince.
That's too easy.
I'm sorry. You have to convince the voters that they should vote. Right. So I guess
that's why I think this is such a challenge, because we go back to emotional persuasion. We go back to now we're checking off an aspect of human cognition that is in many ways weak or flawed, right? We're so easily manipulated. Our minds are drawn for often the wrong reasons, right? Not the reasons that ultimately matter to us, but the reasons that can easily persuade us. I think we can be persuaded to believe one thing or another for reasons that ultimately don't serve us well in the long term.
And a good benchmark should not play with those elements of emotional manipulation.
I don't think so, and I think that's where we have to set the higher standard for ourselves of what does it mean. This goes back to rationality, and it goes back to objective thinking. And can you acquire information and produce reasoned arguments until those reasoned arguments pass a certain amount of muster? And can you acquire new knowledge? For example, can you reason? I have acquired new knowledge. Can you identify where it's consistent or contradictory with other things you've learned? And can you explain that to me and get me to understand that? So I think another way to think about it, perhaps, is, can a machine teach you? Can it help?
That's a really nice way to put it. Can it help you
understand something that you didn't really understand before? Where it's taking you to. So you're not, again, it's almost like, can it teach you? Can it help you learn? And in an arbitrary space, so like an open domain space. So can you tell the machine? Again, this borrows from some science fiction.
Dude, I have good news for you.
People often learn about this topic that I'd like to understand better, and then work with me to help me understand it.
That's quite brilliant.
I got enough rest that I'm gonna be able to beat your ass for hours on end.
Need to have self-awareness or even consciousness.
I did.
What do you think about consciousness and the importance of it? Maybe in relation to having a body,
an hour to the gym,
having a presence,
an hour and 20 minutes to the gym, and I did
do you think that's
an
important?
hour back, and then I
You know,
walked
people used to ask me what was conscious, and I used to say,
Alright.
I used to say conscious of what exactly? I mean, I think, you know, maybe
Self.
it depends what it is that you're conscious of. I mean, like, so, you know, if you know, it's certainly easy for it to answer questions about, it would be trivial program it to answer questions about whether or not it was playing Jeopardy. I mean, it could certainly answer questions that would imply that it was aware of things. Exactly what does it mean to be aware and what does it mean to consciousness? It's sort of interesting. I mean, I think that we differ from one another based on what we're conscious of.
But wait, yes, for sure. There's degrees of consciousness, so
and there's just in terms of areas. Like, it's not just degrees. What are you aware of? What are you not aware of?
But nevertheless, there's a very subjective element to our experience. Let me even not talk about consciousness. Let me talk about another, to me, really interesting topic of mortality: fear of mortality. The Watson, as far as I could tell, did not have a fear of death.
Certainly not.
Most humans do.
Wasn't conscious of that.
It wasn't that. So there's an element of finiteness to our existence that I think, like you mentioned, survival, that adds to the whole thing. Consciousness is tied up with that. That we are a thing. It's a subjective thing that ends. That seems to add a color and flavor to our motivations in a way that seems to be fundamentally important for intelligence, or at least the kind of human intelligence.
Well, I think for generating goals, again, I think you could have an intelligence capability and a capability to learn, a capability to predict, but I think without, I mean, again, you go to fear, but essentially without the goal to survive.
So you think you can just encode that without having to really
code? I mean, you can create a robot now, and you can say, you know, plug it in and say protect your power source, you know, and give it some capabilities, and it'll sit there and operate to try to protect its power source. It's fine. I mean, I don't know that that's philosophically a hard thing to demonstrate. It's also a fairly easy thing to demonstrate that you can give it that goal. Will it come up with that goal by itself? And you have to program that goal in.
But there's something, because I think, as you touched on, intelligence is kind of like a social construct. The fact that a robot would be protecting its power source would add depth and grounding to its intelligence in terms of us being able to respect it. I mean, ultimately, it boils down to us acknowledging that it's intelligent. And the fact that it can die, I think, is an important part of that.
The interesting thing to reflect on is how trivial that would be, and I don't think if you knew how trivial that was, you would associate that with being intelligence. I mean, I literally put in a statement of code that says, you know, you have the following actions you can take. You give a bunch of actions, and you mount a laser gun on it, or you may, you know, you
How much more?
Screech or whatever.
Yeah. What do you need help?
You say, you know, if you see your power source threatened, you can program that in, and you know, you're going to take these actions to protect it.
Doug, why don't you just ask the questions to ChatGPT?
Well, you know, that's intelligence is protecting its power source. Maybe, but that's again this human bias that says
whatever. Yeah.
I identify my intelligence, my conscience, so fundamentally with the
There you
desire, or at least the behaviors associated with the desire to survive, that if I see another thing doing that, I'm going to assume it's intelligent.
What timeline, year, will society have
Is Twitter Premium
something that would that you would be comfortable calling
It depends.
artificial general intelligence system?
For someone who's got an account like you,
Well, what's your intuition? Nope.
If you're like a big time accountant, yeah. Are you ready for an invitation?
Account like me. How do you know? You don't know what my account is.
Yes, I do.
How many followers do I have?
Like 500.
No, I have 1,300.
Whatever, it's not a lot. Do you want an invitation?
Yep. How many people do you think you've spoken to in your life?
I don't know, maybe 10,000? Like in real life?
More than that? Yeah, more than the average person or less than the average person?
More.
How much do you think the average person's people? How many people do you think the average person speaks to?
Depends who they are, but you're looking at the average person probably lives in like rural China or rural India, and so they're just talking with people in their community. Oh, dude, I sent it wrong. Don't accept that one. I know you did, but I have to send a different one. I don't know, probably less than 1,000.
Okay, I've got more followers than the average person speaks to.
Yeah, that's not a lot because the average Twitter account has about 500 bots anyway following it, not real people.
I would say that I've spoken to about 4,000 people.
Okay.
Alison,
Don't fuck me, dude. Don't fuck me. Dude, have you realized that you're down one hole to none?
if you spoke, if you do heroin, it's going to if you do heroin, it's going to increase your chances of becoming a heroin. Sorry, if you hang around someone that does heroin, it's going to increase your chances of becoming a heroin addict.
Okay.
That's the best advice I've ever gotten. Someone said that to me like a couple months ago.
That's the best advice you've ever gotten?
No, it's good advice though. The best advice I've ever gotten was focus on your health, because if you can discipline your health, then you can discipline everything else. You have discipline on everything else.
What are your thoughts
But that if
on
you
this
can't,
piece of advice? Put the ball in the hole. Did you realize that you're down two holes to none? Did you recognize that you're down two holes to none? Yeah.
all my water weight's gone.
That's cool, dude.
For
Can
the
you
last 2 days, I've just been the same weight, which means it's going to take me longer to burn the fat.
rank that shot? You're done, Zoop. Do you think you're better at literati than Riser?
He bent me.
Did you play again?
Got enough for his bedtime. Ew. Oh, fuck, I fucked it. That's not gonna be a home run. Oh, home run.
Yes, sir. That wasn't good.
Well, the whole placement is exactly where I wanted to be. I just
Oh, that was not good. Too bad you got like a. Oh no. What are your thoughts on Bill Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson? What are your thoughts on Bill Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson? Oh, she's a smoking hot cheerleader chick. She looks
okay.
like she looks like a Disney villain, but like hot.
What's the date today?
Today is May 3rd.
Okay.